Hey guys, welcome back for another edition of Radio 815, the podcast dedicated to examining the work of writer director J.J. Abrams. I'm your host for this time around. My name is Marcelo Inostroza, joined as always by my fellow co host, Matt Crandall. And on today's edition of the show, we will continue to make our way through the one and only season of Alcatraz. We will be focused on episode 3 today, entitled Kit Nelson. So, with that out of the way and being said, Matt, I have one question for you. If you say one word, I swear I'll kill your brother.
Yep, and that's what Kit Nelson, the inmate from Alcatraz, tells his victims when he kidnaps some kids. So he returns to the present day, and I gotta say, initially I was a little bit put off by the fact that it only took 3 episodes for this group to go to child murder. So, obviously Alcatraz, the worst of the worst. So it's not just like petty crimes that are in Alcatraz. It is big bad guys. But a guy who gets off on kidnapping kids, making them spend the days with him, and then murdering them and returning them, um, kind of fucked up. Kind of some real sicko shit that, Bad Robot generally doesn't go that dark. So the fact that that's where we were going already this early in the season of Alcatraz, I was like a little put off by it. But also, I think the reason that they did it is because by the end of this hour, we find out that Soto has a similar thing that happened to him in his past. So this whole episode is about Soto trying to get ahead of the curve to rescue this kid Dylan who got kidnapped. They realize that it was Nelson because he leaves his trademark chrysanthemum flower in the bed of his victim. And so by the end, we find out that when Soto was 11 years old, he was also taken. Now, we don't get many more details. So we don't get the full explanation of his trauma, but obviously it's important enough to his character that they dropped it this early in the series because they want us to know. And as Hauser says, look, man, a lot of people who go through trauma, they stop developing. They have arrested development at the age that the trauma occurred. And if you're going to be hanging with us, chasing down the 63s, I need adult Soto, not 11-year-old Soto. And I thought that was kind of interesting. It adds an interesting layer to the performance that Jorge Garcia is already giving because his character, Hurley was kind of childlike, but like with wonder even when bad things were happening to him. And this guy is kind of childlike, but it does feel a little bit like Arrested Development, like something happened that he didn't progress. But also, as Hauser points out, because he has so much time spent studying the inmates of Alcatraz, even though this is a huge red flag for Hauser, whether Soto should be on the team or not, he said, look, you've got double the amount of experience that most people would need to be an expert in this field. I'm jumping ahead to like the last scene of the episode, but it's kind of the thing that made this episode worthwhile for me because the whole time, I'm not, like I said, I don't love that we go so dark where it's a kidnapped kid who's going to be murdered. Ticking clock. I do like a ticking clock, but I don't like all the scenes of the creep Kit Nelson palling around with Dylan because it's just kind of icky.
This episode played very different from me than last week. And the main reason for that is because I thought the team hunting down a pedophile from Alcatraz, I thought it added a different dynamic that we haven't seen so far in the show. And like Matt said, the fact that they were hunting down basically a pedophile gave us a sort of sneak peek into Soto's childhood. I abhor adults who abuse children. I hate that. So it was just a really, really fun time watching Soto and watching Rebecca hunt this asshole down. And every scene with Kit and this little kid just made my blood boil like 100 times over. And that's why towards the end of the episode, when they finally caught him, when I thought that they were going to take him away to Hauser's prison, and when Hauser shot him, I was like, good. The emotional stakes that our characters had to go that our characters had to go to in this episode because they were hunting down such a evil individual. Those stakes were not present in last week's episode.
Yeah, well, again, it's because they give us a ticking clock where if they
Right.
don't find this kid by Sunday night, he's going to be dead. And halfway through the episode, Soto knows where they are going, and he shows up at the diner because he is, the expert on all things inmates, and he fucks he fucks up his chance to intervene, which makes it even worse. Where he's like, "I just got that kid killed, didn't I?" Because he tries to separate Dylan from Kit Nelson, but he doesn't do a good job, and Kit Nelson gets one over on them and gets away, and that does make it more of a higher stakes because we care more about, we don't want to see some poor kid get murdered, especially because this kid hasn't had enough screen time to be annoying to us, which, sometimes on these other Bad Robot shows, like the kids get too much screen time and they're annoying and you're like, I don't care either way. This character's awful. But this one doesn't. So like, he's just kind of dragged along, but he doesn't say a lot. They realized like silent was better. Um, but it is just creepy as Nelson takes him fishing and then makes him get in the water and they do this weird drowning game. And like some Jason Voorhees kind of Friday the 13th stuff. And you're just like, okay, this is weird. But I like that, we are still building out this mythology of like why these inmates? Why who is bringing them back? How are they coming back? And in the 60s portion of this, we see Kit Nelson after he has had his ass fucking beat. So we see that this is his fourth dance, they say. He's already had a couple dances where the inmates beat up the child murderer, which is, the way things go. And as he's recovering, we see Dr. Beauregard and somebody else on the side of a curtain. They're taking blood from another inmate and they start talking and we find out it's Madsen. It's our lead's grandfather, and him and Nelson have a talk. And so like immediately like we're like, okay, we've had this shadowy figure behind the curtain in a previous episode and now we find out who it is. But it also makes us wonder like what are they doing? What are they doing here? They're taking blood from inmates, they're doing weird experiments, but like we still don't know to what end, how they time traveled, where they went, and the mysteries are starting to pile up, and I do like that right now, like we're just stacking up mysteries and we're not even fully explaining what the mysteries are, and like we're not fully addressing them because it's still early going. I would say, I'm willing to give this show about 6 episodes of you can start stacking up all these mysteries without even addressing like what's going on until you have to start being a little bit more clear and less vague in, the back half of this first and only season. How are you feeling as, we're seeing the grandfather back in the past doing stuff and having interactions with all these inmates? So like, is he the key? Was he the first one who came back?
I think he's the key to how the 63s left Alcatraz in the 60s and came to our present day, but I don't think he was the first one back. And the reason that I say that, who got shot last week and who we discover is in our present time at the end of this episode. Like my main complaint about last week's episode, there wasn't enough serialization to last week's episode. The episode from last week was essentially an episode of the week that didn't have enough grander story being plotted in the episode. But this episode, although it was about an awful individual, all the flashbacks served to sort of stretch out the grander mystery of the show with the reveal of that individual that could have been responsible for the 63's time traveling in the first place. In the flashbacks, all of the individuals that work at Alcatraz, be it the warden, be it the police officers, all of them, I viewed them as assholes and people who were just who were just beating up these poor prisoners for no apparent reason. But all the flashbacks in this episode make me really, really happy when they would kick the shit out of this pederast. It just made a smile come to my face. Now I'm pretty sure that in the next episode that we talk about next week, I'll go back to hating them. But for this episode, I was like, good job, beat the shit out of that fucking asshole.
Yeah, I liked that. And, you know, the warden does get a great scene where he is trying to find out if Kit Nelson killed his brother, because Kit Nelson's father has always wondered if that's what happened. And he says, he pulls him into like solitary and he says, hey, we're going to have a 4 matchstick conversation. And he lights the match and he's just talking to him as the match burns down. And then he ends up, saying bonus matchstick because he needs a little bit more time in his conversation. But I thought it was like a creepy and effective scene that he gets the information he wants, but it also feels a little bit coerced. So I almost didn't know if it was legit. But obviously, because we know that Kit Nelson is a creep who's, continuing this cycle in the present day, I would have to assume that it was legit that he did kill his brother. And he's like recreating that day that happened with his brother, where they ended up in a bunker and he choked him out, killed him, and he just realized how easy it was and how much he liked it, which is creepy. But I really thought it was an effective scene with the warden, because that guy gets to be menacing and show us that this warden takes no shit. But he got to like monologue a little bit, and it was nice to see him kind of stretch more than we've seen, because he's just kind of been a mustache twirling warden. So I liked that a lot. That was a highlight. We do catch up with, as you mentioned last week, Lucy got shot. Lucy Banerjee got shot. She's in a coma. She didn't die, but like things aren't great. Things aren't great. We just see Soto drawing a comic strip of what happened last week. So he's working on like his own comic book, and he draws, the scene where she gets shot. So I thought that was interesting, especially anytime, because of Lost, when there's a comic book in Bad Robot stuff, you're kind of like paying attention to what it is and what it means. And even the kid who gets kidnapped, Dylan, collects comics, and Soto gives him some to complete his set in the end. But I'm like, is there a polar bear in this fucking comic? So I did like that aspect of it. I did think it was nice that Soto kind of ran point for most of this episode on the case. Rebecca was with him, but she didn't do a lot except for when she showed up and had to drew her gun when Hurley had already fucked up the rescuing the kid bit. But for the most part, like, Soto connects almost all the dots, and they go to the hardware store and they realize that the uniform had been stolen and all that stuff. Hauser is like barely in it. He's only in it like right at the beginning and right at the end, which is fine. Like, we don't need Sam Neill tagging along, because we know that when he's not on screen, he's doing some weird fucked up shit that we don't know about yet. As we see at the end where, he brings the dead body of Kit Nelson to his special lab, throws him on the slab, and it's Dr. Beauregard from Alcatraz. And we're like, okay. And he starts working on him and listening to like a happy tune. And we're like, what in the fuck? But again, it's crazy to me that like when he brings the body, we see the other 2 guys still there. So like by the end of this, are they going to have, 13 bit part actors who like just keep getting work to show up for one day of filming?
The other thing that I was wondering throughout this episode, you just mentioned that we keep seeing previous 63s from previous episodes in Hauser's Alcatraz 2.0. Do you think that they just shot all those scenes with those same actors in one day because they can't keep booking him, or that'll be expensive, right?
Well, that's what I think. Like, this was a Fox show that had like a pretty sizable budget, so maybe they cast local and they were like, hey, we need you guys every 2 weeks. You guys got to show up for one day. And I'm sure that they were just high-fiving each other when they got that gig. Oh, you want me to just come and sit in a cell for, 2 hours of filming while Sam Neill walks by and glowers at me? Sure. I'll do that for 12 episodes. That's a good
Yeah.
gig.
The other thing that ran through my head in this episode is every criminal that has come back so far has been a criminal, but a sort of nice person, except the guy last week. The guy last week was a killer and a murderer. But why would whoever is doing this need someone like Kit Nelson to come back? Why him? Why him of all people? That doesn't make any sense at all.
You got a good point because the only other thing is that the other guys who have come back with a mission. So we saw the first guy go and retrieve the key. The second guy was meant to shoot Banerjee. Kit Nelson just was doing his own shit. So I was confused that we didn't see him do anything that was for like the greater mythology, which makes me wonder, are the people who are sending them back not in full control of being able to actually monitor who they're sending back and when? And if they are, maybe some of these people are ignoring their instructions. Again, like there's no indication that that's the case. So it could just be, if I was watching this when it aired, maybe we would run some theories on the forums. But I just kept thinking, like, yeah, like the first two guys both had a mission and then they also did like their fucked up shit on the side. The first guy killed the warden that he didn't like. Um, but that was not his main mission. His main mission, he had to do another thing. And the sniper, yeah, he killed his random girls that he wanted to kill, but he also did the one thing that we assume was like intentional because he wrote on the window and it was very premeditated. It wasn't random. So I just wonder, what was Kit Nelson's prime directive that he came back and then just fucking went straight for a kid? Or was this kid special in some way that we don't know?
I wonder, special in some way, because we keep seeing in the flashbacks from the 63s, we keep seeing Rebecca's grandfather be mentioned in the last two episodes, and he sort of gets revealed in this episode as Rebecca's grandfather. And they keep taking his blood. So I wonder if that kid that was kidnapped by Kit in this episode had something special about his blood or something. Do you think that I'm onto anything, or do you think that the fact that they're taking so much blood out of the 63s that's just that does that doesn't tie up with the people that they are kidnapping and the people that they are hurting when they come back to our present day?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, again, this show is stacking up a lot of mysteries without fully even explaining what the mysteries are that we are stacking up. Um,
Yeah.
but it's early days where like I'm not frustrated by that. I'm starting to wonder, hopefully they pay off some of this in some way. Um, because I'll be pissed if they don't. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's I'm not frustrated yet. And the mystery of the week, this week, as much as I said I, hate child murderers, so I didn't love it. Um, at least it was brisk and they gave Soto a lot to do. So I did like that aspect. And having Hauser out Soto's past trauma in front of Madsen, I think gives them a good place to go. To see how that pays off in the future, or if it was just something that they drop in so that we know it and we're not going to actually find out the exact details. But I feel like we got to
Mhm.
find out more about that as this goes on. Do you think we're going to find out more, or do you think that was it? It was just they were letting us know that that happened and then we're not going to revisit it?
I listen. I hope we find out more about what happened to Soto when he was a kid, but I have a sneaking suspicion that it was just like it was a story point that they dropped in this episode, and I think they intended it to. I think that they had every intention to pick it back up eventually down the road, but unfortunately, there's not much road left after 13 episodes. So I think that's going to have to be a question in the air. Oh, and by the way, folks, at the time that this episode aired, when it actually got canceled, this was the one episode that I wanted Bad Robot to bring back for years because it drove me mad when they canceled this episode. Like, I mean, when they canceled this series for like 6 months, it drove me mad.
Well, hopefully you don't get driven mad by revisiting these episodes as we go. But this
No,
one, I would
yeah.
say I thought it was fine. Um, Not my favorite episode that we've seen so far. I
Hmm.
think it's probably on a par, maybe a little bit lower than that second episode. The pilot is
Best.
still the best one so far. How are you feeling now that we're 3 episodes in?
The pilot is actually still my favorite episode, but followed by this one. But I need to explain a little bit. The reason why this is my favorite episode is because we learned so much. We learned so much backstory about Soto. If it wasn't for Soto's backstory, I would fucking hate this episode with the passion of a thousand suns. Because, like I said before, I don't like I don't like fucking pederasts. That enrages me more than anything in the world.
Not direct bad robot, but like bad robot adjacent. The mom of the kidnapped boy is an actress named Rebecca Field, who before this show um, was on October Road, which was an Applebaum and Nemec joint. It's very much like a What About Brian meets One Tree Hill, but with like the cringiest dialogue you've ever seen. When this lady showed up, I was like, oh my God, October Road. I was like, oh God.
At the end of this episode, Hauser takes back Nemec's body to Alcatraz 2.0, and he actually asked the doctor from the 60s to sort of perform some procedure on him. So at that point in this episode, I'm like going, what the fuck is he going to do? Is he going to do some Walter Bishop bullshit? I thought that Hauser needed the prisoners alive for some reason, but based on his behavior in this episode, he doesn't need them alive. So I'm interested to see what kind of fringe science the doctor from Alcatraz is going to perform on this supposed dead body in the weeks to come.
Initially I thought like, oh, are they going to bring him back to life somehow in a massive dynamic kind of way? Because this guy didn't have a main mission, is there something in his body that they had put there for him to bring? And maybe that's why Hauser knew, like, well, he delivered the package because it's inside his body, and so it doesn't matter if he's dead or alive. So I wonder, just speculating, random theories, who knows? But it did interest me that, like I said earlier, seeing Dr. Beauregard show up and then start listening to old timey songs about like put on a happy face. I was like, okay, this is fucked.
And on that interesting fucked note, we shall say goodbye for this week. If you want to reach out to us, ask us questions with comments, concerns, we do have an email. Our email is radio815@aol.com. If you search Radio 815 on the interwebs, you can find our YouTube channel, you can find our Discord, you can find our Twitter, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find us pretty much anywhere. But if you guys want to talk to me, I'm available on Twitter or X at Creek Fanatic 88 or on Letterbox. We can log some movies together. But Matt, if the folks want to try to reach out to you but are unsuccessful, where can they go and do that?
Only on Letterbox, logging movies. You know, follow me. I'll maybe comment on your reviews. If you check out my reviews, you can leave a comment, and if you got some sort of Radio 815 message, you can maybe get it in there. But letterbox.com/MDC3000.
All right, guys. So once again, thank you so much for listening to our episodes. It means a lot to us. But until then, as I say often, we'll talk back soon.
Radio 815 is a Balloonhead Productions presentation in association with Killer Newt Productions.